Hello and welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where we explore the twists and turns of love, the pain of betrayal, and the mysteries that lie hidden in the heart. Grief is strange. One moment, you're drowning in it, feeling like you'll never breathe again. The next, the world is moving forward, forcing you to keep up when all you want to do is freeze time. That's how it felt after my mom passed away. She wasn't just my mother. She was my best friend, my protector, the person who made the world make sense. Losing her was like losing a part of myself. For months, I moved through life in a haze, going through the motions of college classes, meals, and restless nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying the sound of her laughter in my head, afraid I'd forget it. The only thing keeping me steady was my dad. We weren't always the closest, but I thought we had a silent understanding. He had lost his wife. I had lost my mother. We were supposed to grieve together, find a way to build something out of the broken pieces she left behind. Then, 3 months after she died, he dropped a bombshell that shattered whatever illusion I had left. "I'm getting remarried," he told me one night over dinner. For a second, I thought I misheard him. My fork clattered onto my plate, the sound sharp in the tense silence. "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He repeated himself, slower this time, as if I was a child who needed things explained carefully. "Her name was Jane. She was an old friend," he said. "Someone he had reconnected with recently." The way he avoided my eyes made my stomach twist. Recently? Mom had been gone for 3 months. That meant Jane had been in the picture while she was still sick. It didn't make sense. I wanted to believe it was just his way of coping, that grief had clouded his judgment. People handle loss differently, don't they? Some hold on too tight. Others push everything away. Maybe that's what this was. But in my gut, something felt wrong, and I wasn't ready for what came next. A week later, Jane moved in. Not just her. Her 17-year-old daughter, Emily, too. I had never met them before. There was no slow introduction, no easing into this new reality. One day, it was just Dad and me, trying to figure out life without Mom. The next, I was sharing a home with 2 strangers. At first, I tried to be open-minded. I told myself it would take time to adjust, but I could feel the shift immediately. The house that once felt safe, warm, and full of Mom's presence suddenly wasn't mine anymore. Jane was polite, but there was something performative about her smiles. Emily, too, was friendly enough, but I could sense it. The way they moved through the house, changing things little by little. The dining table where Mom and I used to sit for hours? Replaced. The scent of Mom's favorite lavender candles? Gone. The soft blanket she used to wrap around me when I fell asleep on the couch? Packed away. Each small change was like a cut, deep and unseen. But I bit my tongue. I told myself I was imagining things. Until Dad sat me down one evening with that serious expression that always meant bad news. "You should consider moving out," he said, his voice measured, as if he had rehearsed this conversation. I blinked. "What?" "For a little while," he added quickly. "Just until we settle in. Emily needs a room." I felt my stomach drop. He didn't just want me to move out. He wanted me to give my room to Emily. My room. The only space in this house that still felt like mine. I wanted to argue, to remind him that I was his daughter, that I had lived here my entire life, that this was still my home. But I knew how that conversation would go. I had already tried to tell him how much this marriage felt rushed, how much it hurt that he moved on so quickly, and he had brushed it off, saying he deserved to be happy. So, I didn't argue. I just nodded. Okay. Then I got up, walked to my room, and started packing my things. No one stopped me. Jane didn't say, "You don't have to do this." Emily didn't say, "I can take another room." And Dad? He didn't tell me to stay. So, I left. I moved in with my uncle, Mom's brother, not Dad's. Uncle James welcomed me with open arms, his face tight with disbelief when I told him everything. But he didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't have to. His silence was enough. For a few days, I told myself I was okay. I focused on my college assignments, buried myself in work, tried not to think about what I had lost again. Then the calls started. At first, it was just 1 or 2 missed calls from Dad. Then 3. Then 10. The texts followed. Come home. Let's talk. I think we should fix this. You're making a mistake. I ignored them. Then came the desperate messages. This isn't just about you. We're a family. I need you to come back. Things can go back to normal. Normal? Normal ended the day he replaced Mom. I didn't understand his sudden desperation until he finally admitted the truth. He had received a letter from Mom's estate lawyer. My mother hadn't just left me memories. She had left me half the house. And now, suddenly, my presence mattered. I didn't respond right away. I let my father's messages pile up, watching the missed calls rack up into double digits. Every hour, my phone buzzed. Each notification a desperate attempt to pull me back into the life he had so easily pushed me out of. I should have felt guilty, but I didn't. For weeks, I had been an afterthought in my own home. My grief, my pain, my sense of loss, all of it had been brushed aside to make room for Jane and Emily. But now, suddenly, my absence mattered. Not because he missed me, not because he regretted what he had done, because he needed me. That realization hurt more than anything. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I sent a simple text. What's going on? His response came within seconds. It's complicated. We need to talk. I stared at the words for a long time before typing back. Just tell me. A pause. Then, your mother left you half the house. I sucked in a breath. Half. I hadn't even thought about my mother's will. When she was sick, she mentioned handling the legal side of things, but I never pushed for details. I had assumed, wrongly, that everything would go to Dad. After all, they were married. It was their house. But she had planned for this. Somehow, someway, she had seen this coming. Come home. We'll figure it out together. I stared at the message, my fingers curling around my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Home. The house I had been pushed out of. The house I had been expected to abandon without a fight. Now, suddenly, I had leverage. Suddenly, I wasn't just an inconvenience. I was a problem. I turned off my phone. That night, Uncle James found me sitting in his kitchen long after midnight, a forgotten cup of tea cold between my hands. What's wrong? He asked, settling into the chair across from me. I told him everything. The calls, the texts, the truth about the house. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. Your mom was smart, he said finally. She knew he'd try to erase her. The words hit me like a punch. Erase her. That's what it felt like, hadn't it? The way Jane had moved in so seamlessly. The way my father had buried himself in this new life without hesitation. The way my mother's things had disappeared, bit by bit, until it was like she had never lived there at all. But she had. She had left her mark. And now, even in death, she was still protecting me. What do I do? I asked, my voice small. Uncle James leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. That depends. Do you want to go back? I hesitated. No. Then don't. It sounded so simple when he said it. But I knew it wasn't. Because my father wasn't giving up. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages. Not just from him, but from other relatives, people who had barely spoken to me before. Family is more important than some petty argument. Your dad is under a lot of stress. You're being selfish. Let it go. She's gone. That one. That one made my blood boil. She's gone. Like my mother was just a memory, something I was supposed to pack away like the rest of her things. Like she didn't matter anymore because Jane was here now. Because my father had moved on. I blocked the number. And then, for the first time since I left, I called my mother's lawyer. He met me at Uncle James's house that same afternoon. I recognized him from the funeral, a kind-faced man in his 50s with tired eyes and a professional demeanor. I assume you've heard about the will, he said, setting a folder down on the table in front of me. I nodded. My dad told me I own half the house. That's correct, he said. But there's more. I frowned. More. He flipped open the folder. Your mother also set up a trust in your name. My heart stuttered. What? A trust fund, he clarified. It's not a large sum, but it's enough to help you if things get difficult. Your Uncle James is the trustee, which means he oversees it until you turn 21. After that, the funds are entirely yours. I turned to look at my uncle, stunned. He hadn't mentioned this. She wanted to make sure you had options, Uncle James said quietly. Options. I swallowed the lump in my throat. She never told me, I murmured. She probably didn't want to worry you, the lawyer said. But she made sure everything was in place before she passed. I closed my eyes, trying to process it. She knew. She had known my father might do this, that he might try to push me out, that I might need somewhere else to go. She had prepared for everything. When I opened my eyes again, the lawyer was watching me carefully. Does your father know about the trust? He asked. I shook my head. I don't think so. Then my advice is to keep it that way. Uncle James nodded in agreement. If he finds out, he'll try to manipulate you into giving him access. He's already trying to guilt-trip you back into the house. The last thing you need is for him to see you as a source of money. I exhaled sharply. So what do? That depends, the lawyer said. What do you want? The answer should have been simple, but it wasn't, because I didn't know anymore. I didn't want to go back, but part of me wanted to fight. Part of me wanted to hold on to what my mother had left me, to remind my father that he couldn't just erase her. But another part of me, one that was exhausted, heartbroken, and done, just wanted to walk away. I need time to think, I admitted. The lawyer nodded. Take all the time you need. Just remember, your mother made sure you had choices. Don't let anyone take that away from you. I sat there long after he left, staring at the papers in front of me, feeling the weight of everything my mother had done to protect me. And for the first time since this all started, I realized something. My father wasn't in control anymore. I was. For days, I sat on the decision like a weight pressing down on my chest. My father kept calling. Jane, too. Even Emily had sent a message, one that felt suspiciously rehearsed. Hey, I know things got weird, but we should talk. I don't want there to be tension. Tension. Like my father hadn't thrown me out of my own home. Like they hadn't expected me to disappear quietly, so they could settle in like my mother had never existed. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on my classes, my part-time job, and most of all, on the fact that I had a choice. That was what my mother had given me. Options. A way out. She had protected me even when she wasn't here anymore. But something still didn't sit right. The way my father had moved on so quickly. The way he had already been reconnecting with Jane while my mother was sick. The way everything had shifted so fast, as if there had never been a home before them, only an empty space waiting to be filled. And then came Sarah. Sarah was one of the few people on my father's side I had always liked. She was my cousin, a few years older, and we had spent a lot of time together growing up. When she texted me asking to meet up for coffee, I hesitated. I assumed she was just another messenger from my dad's side, sent to convince me to come home. But the moment I saw her face, I knew something was wrong. She looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with her cup, her eyes darting around like she wasn't sure how to start. I don't know if I should be telling you this, she said finally. I put my cup down slowly. What is it? She exhaled, rubbing her temple. It's about Jane. And your dad. My stomach clenched. What about them? She hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might back out. But then she looked me in the eye and said the words that changed everything. He was cheating on your mom. For a long time. With Jane. The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the table, my heart pounding in my ears. What? She nodded, guilt flickering across her face. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't even know if I should. But I saw them together. Before your mom passed. The air in my lungs turned to ice. Before? Yeah, she said, shifting in her seat. I saw them at a restaurant once. They weren't just friends. Not the way they acted. I told my mom, but she told me to stay out of it. Said it wasn't our business. I could barely hear her over the rush of blood in my ears. But I did tell someone, she continued. I told your mom. It felt like the room had gone silent. The walls. The people around us. The hum of conversation. Everything faded. You told her? I whispered. Sarah nodded, her eyes pained. Yeah. I felt like she deserved to know. I don't know if she confronted him, or if she just kept it to herself. But I swear, after I told her, something changed in her. She got quieter, more distant, but also more determined. That's when it all clicked. The will. the trust. The fact that she had gone out of her way to make sure I was protected. She knew. She had known my father had already replaced her. That while she was fighting for her life, he was sneaking around with another woman. That when she was gone, I might be tossed aside just as easily. And she made sure I wouldn't be. Tears burned the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I didn't want to cry. I wanted to burn the entire house to the ground. That night, I called my father. He picked up immediately. Finally, we need to. I know about the affair, I said flatly. Silence. Dead silence. I could hear him breathing, hear the moment his world tilted. Who told you that? His voice was sharp, defensive. Does it matter? I said, I know. I know you were with Jane before Mom died. I know you weren't grieving when you married her. I know you threw me out of that house because I was an inconvenience to your new life. And now, the only reason you want me back is because you realized I own half of it. More silence. I could almost picture him, his mouth opening and closing as he scrambled for an excuse, a lie, anything to make himself look better. That's not fair, he finally said, his voice tight. You don't understand. No. I cut him off. You don't understand. You made your choice. You wanted a new life with Jane and Emily? Fine. Have it. But you don't get to erase my mother. And you don't get to act like I owe you anything. I let that sit for a moment. Then I twisted the knife. I'm selling my half of the house. A sharp inhale. You can't do that. I can, I said, enjoying the way the panic seeped into his voice. And I will. I'll find a buyer who won't let you make any decisions. Maybe even someone who'll rent it out. To strangers. Hope Jane and Emily like having new roommates. Wait. Goodbye, Dad. And then I hung up. Blocked his number. And for the first time in months, I felt free. 1 year later. My father never recovered from that call. He tried everything. Begging, guilt-tripping, even legal threats. But he had no case. The house was just as much mine as it was his, and I had all the time in the world to decide what to do with it. In the end, I didn't sell it. But I didn't move back, either. I rented out my half, to a family. A good one. One that needed a home. And my father? He had to live with them. He had to face the reality that he would never have full control of that house. That every single day, he would be reminded that my mother had not been erased. Jane left him 6 months later. I don't know where she went, and I don't care. Emily moved out after that, probably to live with her father. And my dad? He's still there. Alone. Sometimes, I wonder if he regrets it. If he ever lies in that house, listening to the voices of the family I put there, realizing that he lost everything because he couldn't wait to move on. But that's not my problem. I'm still in college. I have a job, a life, people who love me, and most importantly, I have freedom. I won. And my mother, wherever she is, can finally rest knowing that he didn't take everything from me. The end.